A while back I was heading to Asia for 6 weeks. Yes, I am maximising the content from that trip and there is not a goddamn thing you can do about it. Except for not watching the video, but let's not get hasty here now. But while I was planning this trip, I thought it would be super cool to do a small travel camera review. Like for example a Pentax 17. The only issue is, I don't have a Pentax 17. Luckily, I had a friend mad enough to loan me one for over 6 weeks while I dragged it across the world. And now, I have a review of the Pentax 17 as a travel camera. The Pentax 17 is one of the newest film cameras on the market. It is a modern, compact, half-frame camera. Yes, this thing is half-frame, which is where it gets the name 17 because the frame is, well, 17mm wide. Now, this decision to make a half-frame camera is kind of confusing to me for a number of reasons which I'll get to later. But before I get to that, it's now time to walk down the only aisle I'm likely to, and on to Singapore for its first roll. Wow, really empty. So when using the camera, I have to say its size is pretty much perfect. It's compact enough to fit in a pocket and super light and easy to travel with. It's also very easy to load and shoot because this camera is completely automatic. Auto exposure and it has autofocus. Kind of. We'll get to that as well. But all this automation results in the camera dials kind of being a bit odd. You have your usual ISO dial and an exposure compensation dial, but there's no like shutter speed or aperture dial on this camera. So instead of those controls, we have a mode dial. And there are two sections. One side is for flash and one for without flash. Now, having that separated is actually a plus already in my book, because a lot of film compacts don't make it easy to manage the flash. You often have to press a bunch of different buttons to turn it off because it's on by default, and it's super frustrating. But in this case, you can actually pick and keep the flash off if you want it off. Now, in each of these sections, you have a program mode for normal shooting, a longer exposure mode, and a bokeh mode. So the bokeh mode is actually a kind of aperture priority mode, where the camera cranks open the aperture as wide as it can while working with the maximum shutter speed it can. Now, having all these auto modes honestly sounds kind of great until you actually try to remember how to use all of this when you're taking an actual picture. I actually found it much more difficult to figure out what the camera was going to do at the time of taking a picture, rather than just say I want an aperture of f4 and then the camera would pick a shutter speed for me, or I'm taking a picture of something moving, I want my shutter speed to be at least 1/500, and now the camera will open up the aperture as much as it can, assuming there's enough light and the film's fast enough. Or maybe I can say, I know I don't have enough light here, let me use the flash. But instead, with all these kind of automatic modes, it starts getting kind of confusing as to what mode would suit best for the situation, because the camera might do something kind of random. And that actually happened to me a fair bit while using the Pentax 17. I would just rather have an aperture dial and let me control the camera like an actual camera, and to hell with all of these modes. Now, I can understand why they would have these modes, as this camera was kind of marketed to the influencer, kind of, casual film shooting crowd. But I just don't see them using the camera enough compared to people who know what they're doing. Those kind of people will end up just getting a digital camera for the convenience, and the more kind of dedicated, hardcore photographers who want a small film compact would generally prefer more manual controls. So I have a feeling that Pentax kind of muddled the boat here a little bit. That's not to say all things are bad though. Loading the camera itself is super easy with the fast load system. You just slap in a can of film, pull it across the back, close the back, and just start swinging on that film advance until you get to the 0 mark. I've put about 6 rolls for this camera and it has never once failed to load perfectly. And also, because the camera has a manual rewind, you can tell if the film is advancing, because this will turn in the other direction when you advance the film. When you actually figure out the modes and when to use each one and what situation it'll work in and where the camera is playing nice, you have to use the viewfinder to frame up your shot. And the viewfinder is actually fairly decent. It has 2 frame lines, one for infinity and one for close focusing, so you kind of have to guess where your frame is going to be in the middle. But this is just the nature of all non-SLR cameras with separate viewfinders. It is a lot better than a lot of point and shoot viewfinders out there, and it works perfectly fine. Now, the autofocus on this camera is really strange. It's kind of a semi-autofocus. So that means in practice, on the top of the camera, you have various settings here, like your flower, food, person, group, shot, family shot, and then a mountain for landscape shots. Now, on the bottom of the camera, there is actually a distance markers in feet and meters. It does work reasonably well, and that's good, because the lens on this camera is actually fantastic. The image quality I'm getting out of this, for a half frame camera, remember, is actually really quite impressive. You can clearly tell the lens is easily out-resolving any film I've put into this, including things like 50D and Ektachrome 100. Now, it's a real shame this camera isn't full frame, because a lens like this would absolutely shine on full frame. One issue with this, potentially, as a casual camera for people new to film, is actually the half frame format. Now, this sounds like a good thing because it lets people take 72 shots a roll. But the problem comes in handling the images afterwards, because scanning half frames can be a real issue. Most scanners don't handle it well at all, and instead they scan the frames as pairs, which can be a real pain to deal with in post. Now, cropping each image twice is a lot of hassle, particularly if you have new film photographers who just want their photos quickly, and a lot of labs won't scan half frame properly. They just scan it as 36 images and hand you the dual images. But if you want to scan them individually on something like an Epson, then you've got a lot of work cut out for you. It's a real pain in the ass dealing with that many images when you're scanning half frame film. As for me, I actually do all my own scanning, and it is a pain to deal with, particularly on the Cool Scan. The best way by far I found to do this is a DSLR scan using an APS-C camera or a full frame camera in crop mode and a macro lens at 1:1. This lets me separate each frame into separate files so I don't have to split the half frame images, which is a pain in the ass. One point during the scanning process I got really frustrated because I was dealing with so much dust. So I ended up scanning them into CoolScan anyway, and then I wrote up a little script that would split all the images into 2 images automatically, and that solved my scanning issue. So now I can put the images through the CoolScan, split them. Mostly the CoolScan's accurate enough most of the time to get all the images, and then I just have my half frame images ready for editing. But now once we have the images scanned, we have to deal with this being a half frame camera. You know, it takes 72 pictures per roll of 36. And this sounds great, but it also has the effect of cutting the quality of your images basically in half because you've half the surface area to record the same image. But by how much does this affect the camera? Well, what I could have done is compared the Pentax 17 to a similarly priced 35mm camera, or maybe use like a 35mm compact camera. But you know what? To hell with reason, let's compare the image quality to the Hasselblad 500cm with the 80mm lens, just because I want to use the Hassi more. No. What are you doing? Go away. No. No, go away. Jokes aside, because the Pentax 17 shoots 72 frames, I was also able to compare the same roll to a normal roll of 35mm shot in the Nikon F4 using the 50mm 1.8 AFD lens. And yes, the F4 is a bigger, heavier camera and arguably more advanced than the Pentax 17, but it really doesn't matter for this because the lens is what determines the quality here. Now when we compare the half frame images from the Pentax 17 and the full frame images from the F4, 2 things stand out straight away. The grain is much larger on half frame compared to 35mm due to the physical size of the frame, and this is just simply a reality of the half frame format. But I do have to admit that the lens on the Pentax 17 is actually insanely good. You know, this is a really quite sharp lens, and it's very obvious that the limiting factor here is the ability of film to capture a sharp image. You know, when I slap some 50D into this thing, it actually makes a really nice image. It's a real shame though that this is not a normal 35mm camera. You know, with a doubling of the film area, this would produce some absolutely gorgeous images. So as a final wrap up, the Pentax 17 is a real head scratcher of a camera for me. Now I must commend Pentax for making a new film camera in the year of our Lord, 2K+24, but they have made one of the most confusing cameras I have ever used. The lack of proper camera controls like shutter speed and aperture make it hard for experienced photographers who would love, you know, a new compact film camera for travel and light, you know, shooting and fun shooting, make this kind of annoying to use. Also, the half frame format is just strange. It makes handling the images and scanning them just really annoying to deal with, and with that the quality takes a massive hit compared to your normal 35mm frame. So if I was in Pentax's shoes after releasing the 17, I would remake this camera as a full frame camera with normal controls, and then it'd be almost a perfect travel compact camera. And now that I've made a video asking for this, I just know that Pentax will make that exact camera 2 weeks after I release this video, making me look like a massive tit. No. What are you doing? Go away. No. No, go away.